Water, een van de meest fundamentele substanties op deze planeet. 85% van ons lichaam bestaat eruit. En water is als het ware een levende substantie die dan ook door onjuiste behandeling ziek en zelf dood kan zijn. Dit verschijnsel zien we in veel van onze rivieren en zelfs het water wat uit onze kranen komt is volgens onderzoeker Robert Martin dood. We zijn in het noorden van Australië, waar nog veel zuiver water aanwezig is en spreken met onderzoeker Robert Martin over zijn research naar levend water.
In our body there's 70% water, in our brain there's 90% water, and in our blood there's 92% water. So being made of water, it's the most important ingredient for our health and for our mental capacity, and it is directly dependent upon the quality of water, and so is the planet also. The planet is somewhere between 2/3 and 4/5 water, and the quality of that water is dependent upon the quality of food and the quality of our lives, and unfortunately I see we don't treat that water with the respect that it's due.
Mm-hmm. So then you have made the distinction between living and dead water. Could you explain the difference between those two?
Yes, well, this mountain stream that you see here, we're at about 3,300 feet above sea level in North Queensland. It's coming direct from a rainforest. It's completely drinkable straight from the stream. When you purchase a meter, which is called a millivolt meter, you can measure the charge in the water, and this particular water here has a millivolt charge of around minus 150. Now, compared to city water, would have a charge that is with chlorine and fluoride added as well as coming through miles of contaminated steel pipes, as well as being the structure of that water being thrashed through high-speed centrifugal pumps which damage the water. That water in the city has a charge of anywhere from plus 200 to plus 400 to 500 in the extreme. Now in our body, the free radicals that do the damage to the health of the body of that person is cancelled out by negatively charged water. So if you follow the hypothesis through, in having a good diet, drinking negatively charged water, which will cancel out the positive charged free radicals in the body, you can almost stop the aging process. Now,
could I ask you one question? Because in Holland the water is not fluoridated and it's not chlorinated. Would you say it is good water then?
Well, you still need to measure the water, and the many other factors come into classify water as good water.
Yeah.
And one is temperature, of course.
Yeah.
Now the others are pollution, which is coming into the water from surrounding farms, from the atmosphere, from rain, and what is also important is the way that that water is pumped, the amount of steel and plastic pipes it goes through to get to your house, and so many factors. And but above and beyond all is the pH quality of the water and the charge quality of the water.
And what exactly does that do to the water if it's gone through straight tubes and been used and that kind of stuff?
It's like the difference between raw fresh vegetables and cooked vegetables, where the more you manipulate the water and pump the water and mess with it, the more you seem to kill that water, because remembering we're using the yardstick of a mountain stream here, that as it comes down from the mountain, it's automatically filtered through crystal structure in the sand bed of the creek. Each little waterfall has eddies, which are like mini whirlpools, and those whirlpools, as the water goes round in clockwise and anti-clockwise spirals, take in more and more oxygen into the water, especially where that water comes over waterfalls and gathers the oxygen as the water falls and directly pushes the oxygen into the water. Much like you have in a fish pond, where you have a little oxygen pump circulating oxygen in the water.
Now, I heard about those spirals, vortexes, you call them as well, right? From the work of Schauberger?
Schauberger, yeah.
Is that a person you also follow?
Yes, I studied Schauberger's work from Germany. He was, they called him the water wizard. He was a master of water. He studied in the forests of Austria, and he went on to develop many special water systems, including ultimately to the point where he had water generating electricity from water from an extremely small flow of water, yet with a very large output of electricity. He even went on to develop things right on up to craft that were, you might call, flying saucers, or the prototypes, where they could actually had such tremendous power. One early model was even reputed to have broken the hold down bolts, and it took off and went through the ceiling. This is all well documented in Schauberger's work. But coming back to the water, Schauberger was a forester, and he studied the flows of the mountain streams. Once again, he studied how the trout found the power from the water to swim upstream and in fact up waterfalls, but the power wasn't coming so much from the fish, it was coming from the water and the eddies that surrounded or flew around the form of that fish. And so at certain times in certain locations, the whirlpools and eddies would give that fish tremendous force to leap up waterfalls.
So you gain, as I could say, a lot of energy from drinking or being in so-called living water.
Yes, this living water that has this increase in negative charge gives you a remarkable lift in body, mind and spirit.
You even talked about aging, reversing aging and stuff?
Yes, at the moment now, at the end of 1999 here, which is a very amazing time in history. Many call it the end of the Piscean age, if you would, and if you remember the symbolism of the Piscean age, it's two fishes swimming in opposite directions, and the purpose of that age is to bring those two opposing forces, if you would, which could relate to left and right brain, yin and yang, positive and negative, male and female, to bring those opposing forces into harmony. And this harmony is very helped along the way by drinking this quality living water. Now around the planet now there's 4 different sources I know of that are making this very high powered water in laboratories and selling it to the general public at quite high prices. One of these waters is coming out of Turkey. You can see that on the internet on Drumvello's site.
Drumvello Melchizedek.
Yes, Drumvello Melchizedek.
Yeah.
There's another one coming out of America, developed by Patrick Flanagan and Gail Flanagan. He took samples of Hunza water from northern Pakistan, I believe, which is generally respected as the best water on the planet because the people there live to be 120 to 140 years old, even riding horses at 100 years old. So Patrick Flanagan studied that water for 20 years before he found the secrets of it, and the secret was this large minus charge in the water, as well as the almost perfect range of minerals coming out of the melted old glaciers. So some of this water was in fact about 2,000 years old that was coming out from the bottom of the glaciers as they melted, and this water of course was free from all chemical contaminants that we have in modern times. There's another good water coming out of Japan called Bev water, Bev medicated water, and I believe they have over 400 clinics in Japan now running, and this water treatment alone is shown on video to cure things such as leprosy and all sorts of skin problems. Realise here that we're using a high acid water on the outside of the body, and we're using a high alkaline water inside the body.
Could you explain a little bit more about how that works? How would a different quality of a higher quality of water be able to make people more healthy? I mean, it has to do with memory, I heard?
Yes, yes. All water has a memory pattern in the water, because you might liken it to putting all your homeopathic remedies and so on into water as a base carrier. Homeopathic remedies, you tend to use distilled water or boiled water, and that boiling of the water cancels out the memory in the water. But coming back to farming practices, we might recall Rudolf Steiner, and who developed the biodynamic farming practices, and in that machine that he had to spin the water, which was spinning first clockwise and then anti-clockwise to create chaos in the water, through the paddles that he was turning that water in his drum, initially old wooden wine casks, they would turn it to the left sufficiently to create a vortex, and then turn it backwards to create the chaos, to create another vortex, and so on, and do that for 55 minutes. That practice would cancel out the previous memory of the water. Once the previous memory of the water is cancelled, then you can instill into that water a new memory pattern containing exactly what you'd like. Such as with farming practices, if your soil is deficient in silica, which most soils are, and silica carries the memory, as you know from the silica or silicon chip in your computer, then Steiner would introduce the silica, ground silica particles into the mixture, and then you'd spread that out on your field in phase with moon phases and so on, and you'd have a dramatic increase in your soil fertility, which then of course would rub off onto your better vegetables and so on. So
what we see now in this spring where we're sitting at, there are a lot of vortices going around, and so listening to you talking about these chaos in water, what does it do exactly to this water?
Well, as I say, we're looking at this eddy of water running down here. Upon close observation, you can see both left and right hand spins, or clockwise and counterclockwise. The clockwise force, depending on which hemisphere you're in, remember the old saying that in the northern hemisphere you pull the plug out of the bath and the water turns to the left in the northern hemisphere, and in the southern hemisphere it turns to the right. This is according to the positive and negative charge of northern and southern hemisphere. With magnetism, if you want to heal water with magnets, you need to put your jug of water onto the negative pole of a rather large magnet, and that will introduce this charge into the water. A negative pole magnet, which is a south pole magnet, will increase the charge of the water quite considerably and magnetize that water. It unfortunately will not hold the charge for very long after you take it from the magnet, so you need to drink it rather directly from the magnet.
Or otherwise, is there a way of containing this?
Silica will help to hold the charge, just like as silica holds the charge in a computer, and silica holds the charge in our brain and in our blood. And as I said before, with modern farming practices, all the soils are now virtually deficient in silica and these natural elements, which again unfortunately are replaced by synthetic elements which are not the same. They have a different spin, if you would, and are rather over concentrated and do not do the same as your natural elements, because on our farm we use crushed rock dust and so on, natural organic fertilizers, and this particular stream has a lot of crystal structure in the water, and we found it very beneficial. We can now create, following on from Steiner's work, pioneering work, we made up a similar barrel out of non-magnetic materials using a wooden barrel and wooden paddles. We stir that water to the left and the right to cancel out the memory. We found that every 15 minutes the polarity changes, which gave us 4 changes in an hour, like there's 4 seasons in a year. We remember Steiner saying directly that do not under any circumstances go over the hour, and we found, measuring the water every minute, that at 55 minutes, 55 is an interesting number, it's the number of man from biblical numbers. From 55 minutes to 60, the polarity of the water starts to change, and right on the 60 minutes it goes back to a positive charge, and therefore you've lost the whole purpose and you need to repeat the whole procedure.
Wow.
So it's just directly showing that time and spin is related to quality, and we might remember, of course, that the planet is always spinning and that there's only 3 energies, which is positive, negative and neutral. And the neutral, of course, when it comes to free power systems, is exactly where we pull the free energy from. That the positive is on a clockwise spiral coming into center point in a magnet. The negative, as opposed to that, is an anti-clockwise spiral coming into center point. So when we pull out from center point, we virtually have an unlimited source of power, because that energy is coming in or falling into the center point or to the vortex in the middle. And this is well documented now in a lot of private free energy research, and of course over the top we still have Big Brother that's always trying to suppress this type of knowledge.
That's right. I would like to know, just from practice, you start drinking this so-called living water. What happens to you?
Yes, well, we found when we started drinking this, what we call living water, that we started off with a charge of about 110. When we measured a sample of the Lourdes healing waters in France, that was approximately a charge of 130. And of course people pay big money to go to Lourdes to be healed with those sort of waters. So we found by drinking the water with approximately a 100 minus charge and quite a high pH, we found initially any toxins in the body begin to be loosened up. You're actually doing a pipe clean job in the body. There's a tremendous piping system through the body, and these pipes block up with toxins and poisons. It's much like I see here on the farm, that as the pipe gets older it gets more and more rusty on the inside, and directly proportional the flow slows down. So as those toxins come out, you need to regulate the power or the potency and the quantity and the quality of that water, so that you basically don't overdose, because you'll end up with basically what's called a severe case of the runs.
Yeah. So is there anything you could advise people in Holland with a lot of, tap water and polluted water? what they could do to make it more vitalized.
Yes, well, temperature is the first factor for good water, and sun really kills water. And of course, you might remember all your dams where your drinking water is coming from are all open to full sun.
We don't have that much sun, though, luckily.
Well, compared to our streams, which hopefully the riverbanks are shading the water with their natural trees and rocks and so on. The next factor is considering your pipes. We might consider bottled water, which we've tested, and we may be able to show you some graphs on that later. The bottled waters are not necessarily good at all these days. In fact, many of them had a plus 2 to 3 to 400 charge. They also are in plastic bottles, of course, and they're also sitting on supermarket shelves, subject in many cases to frequencies from many different electronic sources, which tend to affect the water as well. So once again, I would suggest people in the city, possibly rainwater is a reasonable source, but the best sources of water is always a living spring, because that water is then filtered through the ground and kept at the right temperature through the ground. Another thing we can do in the home is, as I said before, the magnetized water, giving it a magnetic charge, the south pole of a magnet all the time. Another thing that we might say Big Brother or higher interests have tried to keep confused from the public is the polarity of magnets. That you see in Europe you have one colour coding, in America is another colour coding.
Colour coding, what is that?
Colour coding is where they colour the magnet either red or blue for positive or negative, or red or white, or red or green, and so on. And of course this is very confusing to the general public exactly as to...
So then you're confused about what kind of magnet you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the polarity can definitely always be confirmed by taking a regular compass, which you have with the compass is the south pole, a south pole needle pointing to north pole, because the law is opposites attract. Just think of male and female, opposites attract. So knowing full well that the south needle is pointing to the north pole, you take a magnet and slowly bring that in towards the compass, and if you have the north pole side of the magnet, which is then attracted to the south pole needle, and you get what's called a lock-on, or the needle continues to lock onto that magnet, you've proved the point of that's north pole on the magnet, which you then mark, therefore the other side is south pole, and then you're away. The healing principle of magnets is that south pole is warming and invigorating and stimulating for both the body or body organs or water, and north pole is the opposite of warming and so on. North pole is used for areas that are in the body that are overstimulated and need to be brought back to par.
So that is a way people can treat their water so it becomes more vitalized. Now I've heard also there's some devices that you can buy, they're pretty expensive, but what do you think of it? There's sort of Schauberger vortex crystalline devices.
Yeah, there's a water that was developed through Walter Schuberger's son, and he was working with a fellow called Grandier in Austria, I believe, and they developed what's called the Grandier water, and they made a whole series of devices containing that water, and basically they're out of food grade stainless steel or non-magnetic stainless steel, and the chambers in there contain this high spin, high energy charged water, and as your normal water flows through there, it's automatically converted through an exchange process. And the only problem with these devices is that once again they're very, very expensive, and again they're not explaining the principle to the general public, which is therefore not empowering you to do the same thing at this crucial point of history and turning point of the planet, where we need to have all these energy sources available at the very, very cheapest prices, and to also spread the technology of how we can do these things ourselves and not pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for something that is so-called secret.
Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what water could mean in the 1990s to transform energies? You were just talking about it a little bit already, but maybe tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, as you get up into the higher qualities of water, we found, we looked at another one coming from America that Flanagan developed, and he sold out to another larger company for $1.5 million, I believe, and they're making a product called microhydrin, and they stabilized this synthetic Hunza water, if you would, into a white powder. And just one of those capsules into a glass of water will convert the water from a plus 400 charge into a minus 400 charge, or the equivalent to the living force of 8,000 glasses of orange juice. Then as we investigated that water and potentized that water more, getting that water up to what is around the maximum for human consumption, up to around about 800 minus charge, we found the first things that happen is that you don't want to sleep, or you can't sleep. Meditation and mental faculties are vastly increased. On the downside, you lose interest in a lot of the mundane things of life, such as paying your bills and taking responsibility for putting oil in the car and so on. So there's a trade-off between becoming a total mountain yogi and living a reasonable, balanced, harmonic lifestyle and being able to help others in this time. Another thing we did with that water was to introduce into the water a silver quality. I'm sure you've heard of the qualities of colloidal silver, and then the higher one, of course, now is colloidal gold, and then stemming on from that again is what's called now white powdered gold, or if we go back to biblical things, it was called the showbread or the manna in ancient times. You'll see this in the Bible. As a matter of fact, if you look at chapter 2:17 in Revelation, that it says, the promise in the later days that I will give unto you the hidden manna, and for those a new name is written, which no one knows except that person concerned. Well, basically words to that effect, which is saying that the changes will be so profound that you'll no longer be the person that you used to be, and that these things are possible at the end of this age, and directly in accordance with those prophecies, these things are coming about now. We directly realise that they're not and will not be available for everyone, and especially those that do not seek out these things. For instance, I've had people ring me from around the world asking such what I call ridiculous questions that I believe, such as I believe in taking these living water products or living gold products that you can instantly know the winning numbers of your local lottery and things like this. And of course that is not the purpose, and immediately from that we see that personal greed coming in, rather than the desire, overwhelming desire to help your brother man.
Now you talk about changes. What kind of changes exactly do you mean?
Well, certainly this time I think we're all aware of the vast increase in earthquakes. Once again, understanding that what we see on television and hear on the radio is only the tip of the iceberg. If you actually go to the official records, which are now very hard to get and are being suppressed, the number of earthquakes and earth changes and so on are dramatically on the increase. As we find from water, it is very, very difficult now to get any water on the planet that's not polluted in some way. And of course your major rivers in all the major cities of the world are all very highly polluted. And on top of that, one wonders how and why is it possible that they're putting an aluminium poison into those waters, which is a direct poison, and giving that to the general public. One wonders, and of course an offshoot from that is we cannot expect good results from living waters and other health products if we have a mouthful of mercury poison, because one wonders at brain capacity sometimes when we look up mercury in the dictionary and see that it's a total poison, and yet we walk around with mercury fillings in our teeth. And one of the biggest breakthroughs I had in my personal health many years ago was when I got that mercury out of my teeth and replaced it with a balanced inorganic synthetic material, natural material. It was a great improvement in health. The mercury in the metal of the mercury, which is an alloy, tin and copper and so on, can also contaminate waters, but of course it can also be filtered out and so on. And we need to be very aware of toxic metals in the body, and these sort of living waters will help to cleanse the body of those toxic metals. So I would suggest if you can track down a source of these living waters, and also look to the videos on the subject which give a whole range of information. There's a video out of Japan on what's called bev water, and they show a man with leprosy that has no toes on his feet, and they were going to amputate the whole foot, and simply by treating the foot and the ankle with this amazing bev water, soaking it in water different times of the day, and the man was drinking a living water. In 2 months later, the man walked out of the hospital with a thong on his feet with brand new toes. Absolutely remarkable. Remarkable. And,
that's incredible.
This is coming out of Japan, but it's very high prices. But of course, as the knowledge spreads more, hopefully we'll get the price down, and this will be available to all those that seek these vast improvements. Yeah.
Now you also have a book from Victor Schauberger. Could you maybe share?
Yeah, this is one of the books that I call the Bible of Living Waters. It's by Colin Coates. He's an Australian. I do know the man. He lives down south here in Australia. He's travelled very extensively, and he's studied with Schauberger's son and studied all Schauberger's work. And an absolute remarkable book which has tremendous amount of mile-setting information on waters, ranging from the qualities of streams to all the drinking waters to health and all its ramifications. So I'd really suggest you look for this book, and I'm sure we can give you the IBM number and so on later.
Yeah. Now, let's go away from water a little bit. You talked about the sun earlier, and there's something with the sun these days, right?
Yes, there's big changes happening with the sun. We studied these quite extensively, these things. My personal studies go back to 6 years of intensive work with a lama. This lama was from, which is a word for teacher, and in, I might just say there's, with lamas there's 2 grades, a red hat and a yellow hat. The yellow hat lama, they cut the main blood veins here with a knife, and you have to stop that blood flow with mind over matter. Oh, yeah. So hence you don't see many yellow hat lamas these days. Oh. But that lama, the things he told me some 20 to 30 years ago are now coming to pass, and they actually have a satellite up there monitoring what's happening to the sun. And
in Tibet?
Not in Tibet, no. The satellite is going around the sun.
Oh, okay.
But the polarity of the sun is changing, and if we look at work by another man in America, an ex-geologist and a researcher in this work, a man called Greg Braden. Okay. You'll find him on internet. He shows a direct relationship to what's happening to the sun, what's happening to the earth, what happens to our brain, what happens to our cells, and so on, a co-relationship. And how they found this co-relationship was when they were measuring the EKG of the heart on the heart machines, they found in the background was a pulse, and the pulse of that background pulse was 7.83 frequency, hertz frequency. And someone said, well, wait a minute, isn't that the frequency of the earth? And yes, that was correct, or correct up until 1985. But subsequent medical research found that the cells have a pulse of 7.83, the brain has a pulse of 7.83, and the sun has a pulse of 7.83. So therefore what happens to the sun happens to the earth and happens to us because we're part of that system, a living system. In 1985 they found that the pulse of the earth began to increase. From 7.83 they begin to measure it at 8, 8.5, 8.9, 9, 9.9. Nowadays it's very hard to get exact information because it's suppressed, but I believe it's somewhere between, let's say, 10 and 12. When we look at the science of numbers or frequencies, you may have heard the Fibonacci series of numbers, which in there is also the golden mean. At a frequency of between 13 and 14, there's what's called a phase shift, and as we head towards that phase shift, we know that all things here on earth and within our own self, there will be a very quick and rapid change. Once again, we're reminded of the instructions in Revelation in the Bible, that in the later days ye shall all be changed quickly in the twinkling of an eye. And it also says, we might underline the word all things.
But it's not just the Bible, right?
Well, the Bible is a tremendous book which can be proved is above and beyond any other book, because now with the advent of modern computers, they have found this, what's called the Master Bible Code. Yeah. And this code in the Bible, when you take a Bible, modern Bible, or the original versions, you had something like 340,000 letters. These letters, when they're converted into numerals or numbers 1 to 9, put into what you'd call a computer program, then you can take that program and have a similar program that looks for similarities of numbers, such on a given page you might have a certain number of 7s, a certain number of 9s, a certain number of 3 6s and 9s, which are harmonic numbers. Then you find an interrelationship between chapters and pages to prove whether each page is in harmonic relationship or balance with the next page, so that immediately you know whether it's been added or subtracted to, as it says in Revelation. Watch out for people that add or subtract to this book, because it's a code, in fact. Now, this Bible code, you'll see books are available on it, and it has been proven by such high research from people in NASA and so on that set out to disprove it and found they actually could prove it. And I might mention there was a couple of prophecies there that have really helped, that said with Israel there was 3 danger points in history that came out of the computer at 1996, 1997 and the year 2000. And one of the prophecies was about a man called the assassination of Rabin, and that was there word for word, spelled out in great detail, and also the danger in 1997 where a possible assassination was prevented from this very numerical code that's in the Bible.
But I heard that they also got that out of Nostradamus' work, these kind of dates and suggestions.
Nostradamus' work is quite an enigma in many ways. Nostradamus was quite a seer, but above and beyond that, he was also a very good master of numerology, or the science of numbers, and he was also a master of astrology. And most of his work came from the understanding of planetary configurations in the future, such as when there was planetary squares or crosses, or certain strong planetary influences that he knew would, by those influences, would cause earth changes such as earthquakes and catastrophic weather patterns. And also, because it upsets the flow of tides, if you would, upon the planets, upon the planet, it also affects the flow or blood flow in people. You might recall how from any hospital the records show on a full moon people get that sort of moon madness, and the accident rate doubles simply because people get more emotion. And but Nostradamus did say a lot of things against this particular time, and one of the main things that is coded into Nostradamus' work, into the pyramid work and into the biblical work, is a planetary alignment that is coming up on the 5th of the 5th 2000. The big computers say that will put 3.5 times the levity, which is the pull upon the earth, that we've never seen before. So certainly we're moving towards a time where we can expect large changes from those gravity changes at that time. And dovetailing in with that, of course, or just prior to it, is what we call the millennia bug, and
sun flares.
And on top of that, we have extremely high sun flare activity.
Yep.
So bringing all this cosmic stuff down to a personal level to keep it grounded as to what we can do personally, the way I see it, and many New Agey type people, in quote, or a person that is prepared to seek for answers and prepared to follow through with action to gain a greater understanding of these remarkable times, I see, and many others of those I work with see, that we're simply in training for a tremendous change period ahead, and beyond that period, a period of far greater stability, and a planet that is in far more harmony with balance and a far better place to live that's in harmony with all of nature.
Een brainmachine is een apparaatje dat door middel van licht en geluid de frequentie van de hersengolven beïnvloedt. De gebruiker heeft een bril en een koptelefoon op en lichtsignalen en geluidspulsen nemen hem mee naar verschillende staten van bewustzijn zoals ontspanning, concentratie, meditatie, slaap.
Polsdiagnose, gewichtsproblemen, Ayurvedische therapie? Kom naar Health & Wholeness, Leidse Straat.
Nieuwe lijnvlucht Brussel-Paramaribo Intertropicaal vertrekt iedere zondag tegen het beste tarief. Reken maar. Extra veel bagage, gratis touringcar naar uw citybeurt. Retour 2 maanden geldig. Voor meer Air Smiles boek Intertropicaal bij uw reisbureau.
Als je nu bij Telepoint een BEN-aansluiting neemt, krijg je een Nokia 3210 GSM-toestel voor maar 129 gulden. Je betaalt bij BEN geen abonnementskosten en je belt altijd voor een kwartje per minuut, dag en nacht. Je hoort het, voor de beste BEN GSM-deal moet je bij Telepoint zijn. Utrechtse straat 7072, Buikslotermeerplein 193, naast de HEMA en in Purmerend op de Westerstraat 108. Herken je jezelf bellend in deze spot, dan krijg je van Telepoint een prepaid pakket inclusief mobiele telefoon en 65 gulden beltegoed cadeau. Telepoint, zo hoort het.
Een baan vinden die bij je past is niet zo eenvoudig. Ik ben iemand die hoge eisen stelt.
Heb jij wel eens gedacht aan een baan als leidinggevende bij de Amsterdamse politie? Als aspirant-inspecteur krijg je een gedegen opleiding die volledig voor je wordt betaald.
Voor mij is het heel belangrijk dat ik elke dag weer iets nieuws leer. Voldoende uitdaging heb en een dosis creativiteit in mijn werk kan stoppen.
Als jij klaar bent met je opleiding, word je verantwoordelijk voor diverse projecten en teams die je aanstuurt. Een boeiende baan met volop doorgroeimogelijkheden in een multicultureel werkgebied.
Ik zoek een interessante baan met carrière-mogelijkheden.
De politie Amsterdam-Amsterdam is op zoek naar jou.